They've seen the pilot episode of that show about the paper company 84 times. They've watched the mother and daughter walk through that perfect, leaf-strewn Connecticut town every single autumn for the last decade. They've seen the medical drama where the lead surgeon has a crisis in the elevator so many times, they can tell you exactly which floor the doors will open on before the light even blinks. It's 10:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. The house is quiet, the leftovers are cold, and they're sitting in the blue light of a streaming menu that costs them more than their gym membership. There are $300 million worth of new releases screaming for their attention. There are gritty thrillers with shocking twists and prestige dramas that their co-workers will be dissecting at the water cooler tomorrow, but their thumb doesn't even pause on the trending row. They scroll straight to the watch it again list, click play on a scene they could recite in their sleep, and finally, for the first time in 14 hours, they let out a breath they didn't even know they were holding. Their partner thinks they're stuck in a rut. Their Netflix algorithm has basically given up and started recommending things from 1,998. But what's happening in that living room isn't a lack of imagination. It's a high-stakes, neurological rescue mission. The person who rewatches the same show 100 times isn't lazy. In fact, they are often the most mentally overextended people in the room. Look at the surface of their day. We live in an America where every waking second is a battle for your decision muscle. They've spent 8 hours navigating a workplace that speaks in riddles and deliverables. They've managed a group chat. That's a minefield of social obligations. They've walked through a grocery store where choosing a brand of cereal feels like a moral crisis. By the time they hit that sofa, their executive function isn't just tired, it's actually shredded. Choosing a new show, having to learn new names, track new plot lines, and figure out which character is secretly a villain is a cognitive tax they simply cannot afford to pay. They don't want to be challenged by art. They want a sure thing. They want the show where the stakes are manageable, the humor is baked in, and they don't have to worry about an emotional jump scare in the final 10 minutes. It's the only part of their day where they aren't the CEO of their own life. It's the only place where they are allowed to just exist. To understand why this feels like a physical relief, we have to look at the hidden engine of the human brain. Psychologists talk about the mere exposure effect, but let's call it what it really feels like, the security guard of the mind. When you watch a new, high-stakes thriller, your amygdala, the part of the brain that handles flight or fight, is wide awake. It's scanning the screen for threats. Is he going to die? Is this going to end in a cliffhanger that ruins my week? Am I going to be traumatized by a twist I didn't see coming? You're paying for entertainment, but your nervous system is paying in cortisol. But when you put on that show you've memorized, the security guard goes on vacation. You know that even when the characters are screaming at each other, they're going to be okay by the time the credits roll. You know the joke that comes at the 5-minute mark, and you're already smiling before the actor even opens their mouth. This predictability creates a physiological neural safe haven. It lowers your heart rate. It tells your nervous system that for the next 22 minutes, nothing unprecedented is going to happen. In a world of constant, exhausting surprises, having a precedented event is the ultimate luxury. Have you ever noticed that you only crave these old shows when your real life feels like a chaotic, unscripted mess? That's not a coincidence. It's your brain building a wall between you and the noise of the world. Then there's the social snacking layer, and this one hits home for anyone living in a modern suburban landscape. We live in an era of total connectivity and absolute isolation. We have thousands of digital followers, but we often don't have anyone to sit in silence with on a rainy Tuesday night. The person who rewatches isn't just looking at actors, they are visiting digital kinship. To the primitive, tribal part of our brain, the distinction between a real friend and a character you've spent 500 hours with is incredibly thin. When you hear the theme song of your comfort show, your brain recognizes those voices as safe social signals. These characters have been with you through real-life breakups, job losses, and 3 different apartment moves. They don't judge you for your mess. They don't change their political opinions and start arguments at dinner. They don't cancel plans at the last minute because they're drained. They provide a sense of social belonging that requires zero emotional effort. It's a way to fill your social tank so you can survive another day of dealing with real, unpredictable humans who might reject or misunderstand you. Have you ever felt a weird sense of peace just hearing the background noise of a familiar sitcom while you're in the kitchen? That's your brain feeling connected without the social anxiety of actually having to speak. But let's look at the time traveler perspective. This is where the rewatch becomes a form of identity maintenance. In America, we are obsessed with upgrading our phones, our cars, our careers, and even our own personalities. This constant pressure to be better makes us feel like we're drifting away from the core of who we are. A show is a memory jar. When a person watches a series they first saw when they were 23 and living in that tiny apartment with the leaky faucet, they aren't just seeing a story. They are inhaling the person they were back then. They remember the specific kind of ambition they had before the world got heavy. They remember the smell of that specific brand of cheap coffee they used to drink. Rewatching is a check-in with your former self. You realize that you've changed, even if the script hasn't. A scene that used to make you laugh might now make you tear up because you've lived enough life to know why it's actually a tragedy. It's a mirror that stays perfectly still, allowing you to see exactly how much you've moved. You aren't stuck in the past. You are using the past as a lighthouse to see how far you've sailed into the unknown. It's the only way to make sure you haven't lost yourself in the fog of the new. Have you ever seen someone leave a show on as acoustic insulation? They aren't even looking at the TV. They're in the laundry room, staring at a mountain of socks, or they're trying to answer one last email, while the low hum of a familiar space captain's log or a mockumentary office plays in the background. This is because, for the modern American, silence isn't peaceful, it's vibrating. Silence is where the internal critic starts doing disaster math. Silence is where you start worrying about that thing you said to your boss 4 hours ago, or wondering if you're doing enough with your life. A familiar show acts like a cognitive buffer. It's just enough noise to occupy the restless 10% of the brain, allowing the other 90% to actually focus on the mundane tasks of life. It's the sound of someone is home. It turns a lonely chore into a shared experience. It's the visual and auditory equivalent of a weighted blanket. It's a rhythm regulator for a life that feels constantly out of sync with any kind of natural, human pace. When the voice of a familiar lead actor fills the room, the walls feel a little thicker and the what-ifs of the future get a little quieter. There is also a profound moral relief in these rewatches that we rarely talk about. Our real world is a mess of grey areas. Every hero we admire eventually gets cancelled. Every news story has 10 conflicting sides, and the concept of right and wrong feels like it's being rewritten every hour on social media. We are exhausted by the anti-hero era of prestige television, where everyone is cynical, everyone is lying, and everything is dark. Sometimes, the soul just needs a primary color. We go back to these old shows to reset our moral compass. We need to spend 30 minutes in a universe where the big problem is a ruined dinner party or a funny misunderstanding between two people who actually care about each other. We need to be reminded that happy endings aren't just myths, even if they only happen for 22 minutes at a time. It's a spiritual nap that allows us to find the strength to go back out into a world that doesn't make any sense. It's a way to remind ourselves that simple things like loyalty, a well-timed joke, and a sense of belonging are still real, even if they're currently hidden under layers of 24-hour news cycles. But perhaps the most powerful aha layer of all is the concept of narrative sovereignty. In our real lives, we have almost zero control over the big things. We don't control the interest rates, we don't control the weather, we don't control the corporate layoffs, and we certainly don't control how other people feel about us. But when you press play on Season 3, Episode 4 of your favorite show, You are the absolute god of that universe. You know the sad part is coming at the 15-minute mark, and you choose to let it in. You know the big win is coming at the end, and you choose to celebrate it. This is emotional self-regulation at its most brilliant. You are scheduling your catharsis. You aren't escaping reality. You are training your heart to remember that endings can be okay. You are regaining your footing in a world that is constantly trying to trip you up. It is a profound act of agency to say, the world is too loud right now, so I am going to create a small, predictable corner of joy for myself. And then there's the permission to sleep factor. A new show is a commitment. It's an investment. If you start a new show at 11 p.m., you're trapped in the fear of missing out. You stay up too late because you have to know what happens. You wake up the next morning feeling like a zombie because the plot was too gripping to let you go. But an old favorite. An old favorite is a permission slip. You know exactly what happens, so you can fall asleep 10 minutes in to the sound of a familiar voice. There's no FOMO when you already know the ending. You're basically giving yourself a bedtime story. Whether it's the voice of a space captain, a sarcastic doctor, or a group of friends in a coffee shop, those voices become a lullaby for the anxious adult mind. It's the ultimate form of safe sleep. You aren't watching to be entertained. You're watching to be tucked in. The meaningful truth at the heart of the rewatch is that it's an act of radical self-kindness. In a culture that values growth, hustle, and newness above all else, choosing the old is a quiet rebellion. It's a way of saying, I have enough. It's an admission that you are a biological creature with limits, and that you deserve a place where you don't have to perform or process. The person who rewatches isn't stuck in a loop. They are building a sanctuary of pixels and familiar voices that they can carry with them through every real-world storm. They have figured out how to manual override their own stress levels. They have found a way to find home even when they're sitting in an apartment they're only renting for a year. So, the next time you see someone or you see yourself scrolling past the billion-dollar blockbusters to click on that grainy pilot episode for the 100th time, don't feel guilty. Don't call it a waste of time. Recognize it for what it truly is, a homecoming, a way to quiet the ghosts of the day, to feel connected to a version of yourself that felt safer, and to remind your heart that no matter how chaotic the new world gets, the old world is still there, the jokes still land, and for the next 22 minutes, you are exactly where you belong. You aren't watching a show. You're finding your breath again. Press play. You're already home.